Superintendent Segura, President Singh, members of the board, and the Austin ISD community. I'd like to welcome everyone to the budget update and fiscal forecast for school years 23-24 through 26-27. My name is Eduardo Ramos, Chief Financial Officer for Austin ISD. We begin our presentation looking at our current fiscal year budget. Back in June of 2023, we adopted our budget with an estimated $52 million budget deficit. At that time, the legislative session was still ongoing, and so we were projecting our recapture payment to be at $940 million at the end of this current school year. We also knew that we were projecting an unassigned fund balance of $192.8 million. If you look at the column all the way to your right, you will see where we are projecting to end the current school year. We have revised our recapture payment to $630.89 million, and that is a result of tax compression. So the legislative session was finalized, and that included tax compression, which reduced our recapture payment. It also reduced the amount of local tax collections that we receive, and so you see that equal decline in our local revenue. We also took into account the requirements of House Bill 3 dealing with school safety. And so for Austin ISD, we have committed to place a police officer at each of our campuses. And so you see an increase in our expenditures of $5.52 million as a result. So currently we are projecting to end the year not with a $52 million deficit, but with a $30.99 million deficit. That would leave us with an unassigned fund balance of $258 million. When we look at next school year's budget for the 24-25 school year, we wanted to look at three scenarios. So scenario 1, 2, and 3 you see before you. The goal for next school year is to propose a budget with a deficit of $40 million. And we'll show you the differences in these three scenarios. The first scenario assumes that we have no compensation increases. And so that's where you see under net change compensation district priorities, we choose no investments in the district. And so that would still require us to look at estimated expenditure reductions or savings of $30 million. Scenario 2 looks at compensation and district priorities, so additional investments in our budget of $30 million. That would require us to look closely and continue to monitor our budget and find an estimated $61 million in savings to reach the $40 million deficit. And then the third scenario on the far right assumes that we invest in compensation and district priorities $45 million. And so that would require us to find cost savings throughout the year of $75 million to reach a $40 million deficit. If we do reach a $40 million deficit by the end of next year, that would leave our unassigned fund balance at $218 million, or 24.7% of operating expenditures. Local policy stipulates that we must maintain at least a 20% unassigned fund balance. Another way in looking at what happens to our fund balance as a result of our budget decisions, if you look at the 23-24 school year in this graph, before we adopted our budget, we had a $275 million unassigned fund balance. After adoption with the $52 million deficit, we projected a $223.8 million unassigned fund balance. However, as we continue to find efficiencies and reduce expenditures the current school year, we are projecting to end the year with a $258 million deficit. And so as you continue to look at the graph year over year, you see that we start off with a specific projection for unassigned fund balance. As we begin to make decisions and reduce expenditures throughout the year, that does affect our projection. And so after projection, the red bar is basically looking at what amount we are looking at to end the year for each fiscal year. It's important to note that in the 25-26 and 26-27 school years, those will be difficult years for Austin ISD financially if we continue operating as is, which means if there are no changes to revenue and we don't reduce any expenditures over the next several years. So you can see that we failed to meet our 20% board policy in the 25-26 school year and in the 26-27 school year if we make no adjustments to how we operate as a district. It's important to note that the big impact at those two school years is basically because we have not, and at that time we will not receive any increase to the basic allotment for over the past 6 years. And so this graph really shows how that affects our fiscal year budgets. This slide also is another graphic of how no increases to the basic allotment affect our district's budget. So in 22-23, the gray bars are where we were projecting to end the year when we adopted our budget back in June of 2023. The black line is our 20% board policy with regards to fund balance. And so our goal is to always be above that black line. And so for the 23-24 school year, you will see that we will end the year above our 20% goal. So we will end the 23-24 school year, our current school year, with a fund balance of $258.2 million. Next year, we are also projecting to end the year above our 20% fund balance goal. So we are projecting to end the next budget year at $218.2 million, assuming we adopt a $40 million budget deficit. And then again, you see in the 25-26 and 26-27 fiscal years where we fall below, again, the 20% local fund balance policy. Keeping in mind that these projections are what we see as our worst case scenario. If we make no changes to our expenditures, to finding efficiencies as vacancies occur, if we decide to not rehire certain positions because we can no longer afford them, these type of decisions are going to have to be made over the next several years. But you can see that in the 25-26 school year, no increases to the basic allotment for over 6 years really begin to impact the district. Also, during the 25-26 school year, in a later chart, you'll see how recapture continues to increase for Austin ISD, which really impacts our budget. And so because we know we have to make adjustments not only this year, but over the next 3 years with our budget, and finding areas to reduce expenditures so that we can continue to invest in specific district priorities, there are certain areas that we are monitoring in the district. Those include administrative costs that we spend in the district. We're looking at vacancies and evaluating all vacancies as positions become open. We're looking at all contracts that we have in the district starting at 100,000 or more, and really identifying if we can continue to either afford those contracts or are they really delivering the student outcomes that we are hoping these contracts deliver. We're also looking at software throughout the district, looking at opportunities to really combine softwares into one software that does the same function versus having multiple softwares that do the same function. And so that really produces efficiencies in our costs. We're also looking at overtime, making sure that we control overtime throughout the year in the district. And then we're looking at revenue alternatives. Where can we increase revenue as a district? There are several options that we have available to us. One is really looking at our daily attendance, making sure that students do come to school on a daily basis. We're also looking at maximizing our interest earnings as a district. And so these are opportunities that we have that we can continue to impact our budget if we manage our finances wisely. In looking at the next slide, you look at our budget development process. So we are in full swing with our budget process right now. We are currently in the engagement process. So we do meet with our committees throughout the district, with our budget community. We hold information sessions regarding our budget to receive feedback. And our goal is to really involve all stakeholders in the district to really begin to mold and begin to form district priorities and where we really want to concentrate our limited budget dollars. We began to analyze our data as requests come in from campuses and departments regarding the budget. And then we begin to implement strategies and look for reductions in not only the current fiscal year, but future fiscal years in the district. We present and propose a preliminary budget to our Board of Trustees, both in April and June, with a final goal of proposing a budget for adoption in June 2024. We also know that in 2023, the legislative session began. And when that session began, we had high hopes that we would receive an increase in funding to the basic allotment, which is really the main area that school districts receive their funding on a per student basis. The legislature began the legislative session with a $33 billion surplus. Unfortunately, after 4 special sessions, there was no increase to the basic allotment to per student funding for school districts. And so what that means for us is that we will be on a fixed income, in essence, since the 2019 school year. So we will not receive any increases to our per student funding for over 6 years. Keeping in mind that even during that period, inflation has risen by over 14.5%. So just to keep up with inflationary dollars, we would need a basic allotment increase of between $900 to $1,000 per student. That would, in essence, equate to a revenue increase for Austin ISD of $64 million, just to keep up with inflation. And so because this legislative session ended with no increase to the basic allotment, we did not receive that increase in revenue funding. And so that is why you see in the 25-26 and 26-27 school years that we really began to have ultra tight budgets, and we will have to make some tough decisions with regards to where we must cut funding in the district. This next chart shows the comparison of the basic allotment, again showing that we have not received a per student increase since the 1920 school year. So currently, all school districts in the state of Texas are funded on a per student basis with the basic allotment at $6,160. Because there was no increase this past legislative session, we will remain flat for a total of 6 years through the 24-25 school year. Also, as you know, if you are part of Austin ISD, we continually talk about recapture. When the state moved forward with property tax compression, that did decrease our recapture payments. So you see in the 23-24 current school year, before tax rate compression, we had projected a recapture payment of $940 million. That payment did drop to $630.9 million. Keeping in mind that our local tax collections also dropped by an equal amount because we had to reduce our tax rate. And so in essence, that did not, or tax compression did not equate to any additional funding for school districts, including Austin ISD. You do see that our recapture payment was reduced for both the current year and forecasted for next year at $692.1 million. However, you also see that because of our rapid taxable values and property values in this district, that recapture payment will continue to grow and escalate. And we are projecting in the 26-27 school year that our recapture payment will be over $1 billion. So it is a temporary reduction in our overall recapture payment. But again, these were not additional funds to school districts and to Austin ISD due to an equal reduction in our local tax collections. Our student enrollment has been declining over the past several years. Uh, as a district, we budget with a flat enrollment, and so our projections include a student enrollment count of 72,800, which is a flat enrollment over the next several years. When you compare Austin ISD and what we pay into recapture compared to other districts throughout the state, the districts that you see before you, Houston ISD, Midland, Pecos, Barstow, Toya, and Plano ISD, these are some of the top paying recapture districts in the state. When you look at their recapture payment compared to Austin ISD's recapture payment, you see that we are the top paying recapture district in the state of Texas. Through our budgeting process, we continue to really receive stakeholder input, staff input, community committees throughout the district, and of course, our Board of Trustees. Before you is a list of the priorities and focus areas that we concentrated on as a result of our budgeting process for last year. And so these were the budget priorities from the prior fiscal year. Our goal is to continue to have a transparent budgeting process, continuing to receive really stakeholder input from our community. We share this feedback with our Board of Trustees and leadership so that we can finalize a budget priority list and where we as a district want to concentrate our funding. This gives a historical snapshot of where we have been with compensation. Back in 1920, we invested in our employees $35.2 million. Last year was one of the biggest investments that we have made in compensation with our employees, simply because we saw such a large number of vacancies in the district last year. And so we knew this was an area that we had to address as a school district. Austin ISD is one of the highest cost of living areas to live in. And so we wanted to really make an impact where teachers could afford to live where they teach, where our hourly employees could afford to live where they work. And so we gave a 7% increase to our teachers, librarians, counselors, and we also increased our minimum hourly payment to $20 per hour. So that investment cost the district was an investment of $64 million. We also know that because there has not been an increase to the per student funding to the basic allotment, making an equal investment this following school year will be difficult. And so we do know that our goal is to continue to look at compensation, but our reality is, because of how current school funding is structured, we will not be able to invest an equal amount as we did last year. So if you want to really take part in our community conversations in our budgeting process, the next two slides are a list of community engagement opportunities that we have as a district. We will be giving budget discussions and having these discussions both in person and virtual through Zoom. And so you see the schedule before you of the next several community engagement budget meetings that we will be having all the way through April 30th of 2024. Our goal with this process is that we continue to, or we begin with a starting point, which is our budget and the budget discussions. But we want to make sure that we look at what initiatives do we have in the district? Where do we want to implement student-focused strategies? We also want to make sure that we look at the goals that we have as a district so that we can implement organizational goals that align with our mission and our vision. Austin ISD has clear values that we identify as a district, so we want to make sure that we incorporate the district's values into the budgeting process. The ultimate goal with our budgeting process is to really allocate resources that ensure the optimal learning experience for all students. So we feel that through our transparent process involving all stakeholders from staff, district leadership, our Board of Trustees, and our community, we deliver a budget and propose a budget that really gives us the best that we can give with regards to student outcomes. And so we continue to receive input. We do have a tool for the community to really give us your thoughts through a product called Thought Exchange. And we want to hear from you. And before you see a QR code where you can actually go in as a community member and give us your thoughts with regards to what are the most critical things Austin ISD should consider when making a decision regarding our budget and our budget reductions over the next several years. And so give us your thoughts. You have an opportunity to not only enter your thought, but also see the thoughts of others and actually rate those thoughts. And that's very important to us. Again, we incorporate all this information. We want to know what you as a community are thinking as well. And then we give this feedback and recommendations, and the board does take this into consideration. So thank you for being part of this presentation, and you all have a good evening.